In a world where anyone can have a podcast, Peter Von Panda is one of them. Rants are taken to a whole new level. This is the Peter Von Panda Podcast, a giant waste of time.
What's happening, Panda Nation? Peter Von Panda here. Want to talk to you about the new Ford Bronco. They finally released it. I know that there have been leaks galore early on, and the Ford Bronco was supposed to be unveiled much earlier this year, but they have finally done it. I have been watching a bunch of videos on it. I would love to see this car in person, but I wanted to give you some of my impressions on it and show you specifically why I feel the way I feel about it. I also am going to do another episode, which I've been meaning to do, on how car companies can do retro or vintage or heritage style cars correctly. And I think the Ford Bronco nailed it. But if you want to see my deep dive into why some heritage inspired cars fail versus the ones that do well, I will put that in another episode. I don't want to go into that too much right now. But the Ford Bronco is out. And there are really three main versions of it. There's a two-door Bronco, there's a four-door Bronco, and then there's a Bronco Sport, which looks a little bit like the Ford Escape or Ford Explorer, but in Bronco form. I also love the fact that the Bronco is the brand name, so that's kind of cool. So I did pull up the Bronco here. You can see that it looks very boxy. It actually looks very much like the renders. I will also say this, that based on the spy photos, based on the renders, I was not that excited. I thought it was going to be a little bit of a miss, not a hit, but I will say that, you know, the actual production version here or the pre-production version looks pretty good. You know, if I look at this I think leaked photo earlier, I was a little bit, I wasn't sure what to make of it. But I would say that, especially in this orange, for whatever reason, that one really works for me. I'm not an orange car color guy, but that one really works. The big wheels work really well too. But I'm actually really in love with it. And what surprises me is that the four-door version is actually not my favorite. In the Jeep Wrangler world, the new four-door Wrangler, or the current four-door Wrangler, is actually the one I'd probably have, even though I used to own a two-door Wrangler. But man, this two-door Bronco really works, and I think it's this big roll cage and the fat fenders and quarter panels here. What's really interesting to me is that obviously this is a competitor to the Jeep Wrangler. It's right at the same price point. It's about as easy an apples-to-apple comparison that you can make. It'd be great if GM jumped into this. I thought the Hummer HX, I'll talk a little bit about that, was a great option before they killed the Hummer brand off. And like I said, some of these other early Bronco renders were just a little bit too much Bronco elements on our badge engineer car, but I think these Broncos look tremendous. And I've been seeing a lot of videos. I'm not sure when I could put my hands on it, but man, if one shows up at a dealership, I'd love to go take a closer look at it and just see what my thoughts are. Fit and finish, and I don't expect it to not be anything other than what it's promised to be. Ford has been doing a bang-up job of improving their interiors, quality of materials, fit and finish. They've been really hitting it, even though as a business they haven't been hitting it. You know, and you can divorce loving a business or loving a product. I like the Tesla cars. The business for me has always kind of created some consternation, although, you know, stock-wise they're on a tear, but I think they missed some opportunities to be the platform for electrified cars and some of that other stuff. I would say that the Bronco Sport is the least interesting to me. It looks more pedestrian, and there are a couple of reasons. So first of all, let me get into the Bronco, why I love it. Again, I didn't think I was going to love it as much as I did, and one of the issues to me was that I thought it was going to be a little bit more mundane. Well, let's take a look at this snapshot of the Bronco. In some of the earlier spy photos, this lower part of the front fascia, this little trim piece below the grille was not painted. And what I love about this is it makes the whole front end of the car look finished, right? The top rolls into the flat grille here and then rolls underneath. And that gives that piece kind of its own standalone appearance. And what I love about that is that typically when you really make a car off-road, you replace this bumper. And Jeep Wranglers are notorious for this. You put a big off-roading front bumper on it, and it kind of looks like the front of the car is designed to use the bumper to kind of fill it out. And in this case, they've almost made it so that the bumper, while it looks, the fit and finish looks great, it fits the car entirely. If you took this off, if you got rid of the bumper completely, the car would still look finished, in my opinion, because they've kind of encapsulated that whole front end, right? There's kind of a natural break here, and with it kind of curving in, it almost looks like a finished car, and that actually lends the design to look higher up. So even if you don't have these big tires on it, you can see that even though the clearance in the bottom of the car is right here, but if you were just to look at the front of the car, it kind of looks like the bottom of the car is right here. So if I took off that bumper, it kind of raises up the car, gives it a much higher kind of aggressive look. It makes it look like it's an off-roader. It makes it look like there's a lot of clearance. And then if you replace this bumper with anything else, because the roll of the body lines flows very nicely with what's left, the car doesn't look unfinished, regardless of what bumper I think you would put on there. So I really like that. That's a really subtle little thing that I like. Now, I also didn't think I was going to like this big flat front end. But if I were to just look at the Jeep Cherokee, what I realized, and not the current Jeep Cherokee, this kind of car, this Fiat-based design one, but back in the day, yes, here it is. They had a design concept called the Casablanca, and you can see they kind of flattened up the front end here. I love these Jeep Cherokees. You know, I love this style. I love the flat end. I think they were great. And what this does here is it lends itself to a very broad front end. And so if I go back to this Bronco here, what you can see is that the headlights stretch all the way to the edges, and there's no distinct fender from the hood. They even have these little bars here, which give it a little bit of a Hummer-like look. But the whole front end is filled out. Let me go over here to the Jeep Wrangler. And even though the current Jeep Wranglers are very nice, I certainly have no issue with them. I certainly am desirous of it. What we have here is the front end gets pinched in. And so you have this more narrow, typical Jeep grille, which I love. But then you use the fenders to kind of fill out that front. And so you have this kind of pointed end. It weakens up that front end. And because you kind of use the fenders to fill it out, they've done a better job here of color matching them, giving them some larger side marker lights, making them look more substantial, more like body panels. But especially on the old, I didn't have the TJ, the YJ Jeep that I have, the fenders were really nothing but cheap plastic, and they were only maybe this wide, and the car was pretty narrow. And so, you know, the fenders didn't do a great job of projecting muscle and, you know, structure. Because you fill out the front of this Ford Bronco with real fenders, kind of like they did on this Jeep Cherokee concept, because there's no kind of weak area here, it really looks good. It looks more brawny up on the front end, in my opinion, than even the Jeep Wrangler. And that's kind of one of those things that off-roaders are looking for. And I just love it. You know, if they had filled this out all the way, that Wrangler would look brawnier. Now, I'm not saying it looks skinny or weak or anything like that. It's just a different design tack. But the fact that you get this big, hulking, squarish front end, it looks almost like Ford had a concept back in the day, Ford Vault concept. And while it never made it to production, it looked brawny, and it was designed to look like a Vault, you know? And I think that was kind of cool, you know? It kind of had that mass. It kind of had that muscular look, even though this was a fairly small car. It just kind of looked like a semi, and I think this has that big, brawny front end. I really like it. Now, the other thing that I like about this, and I think Ford got right, where the Land Rover Defender did not, is the angle of the windshield. They really mimicked the original Bronco, and Jeep Wranglers have done that for a while here, too. What we can see here is that we have a really upright windshield. It's very flat. If you look at this Bronco, again, very flat and very upright. And if you look at the original Land Rover Defenders, they also had a very flat, upright windshield. You can see it right here, right? And what they did, very upright, is on the new Defenders, they really raked it back quite a bit. And unfortunately, to me, what that does is it makes it look much more like a modern passenger car. If you look at the Mercedes G-Wagon, they kept that upright windshield. And I get it helps with wind resistance and the drag coefficient and fuel efficiency and those types of things. But to me, what this does is it lays it back too much, and it doesn't allow it to have kind of that brawnier off-road feel. If this were just a little bit more steeper here, it would fill this out. Right now, to me, the Defender, which I actually like, I really like the Defender. I like what they did with it. I wish it had been a little more heritage styled. I wish it had tied in some of the elements a little bit more instead of going more around it. But where I think they swung and missed is that they really only needed to bring this front edge forward maybe 4 or 5 inches. And I think that would have really done a great job of putting a little bit more mass visually behind that A-pillar and giving it more of a boxy car feel without sacrificing too much in the drag area, as well as it would have kind of visually shortened up this hood. So as opposed to the old Defenders like this, which that's a great looking car, there's a ton of mass back here, and it kind of looks like a little bit of a stubby short front end, whereas on the new Rovers or Defenders, it makes the hood and the front end look longer, and this look a little more dainty. It looks a little more shortened up, even though I bet the overall dimensions and proportions are probably pretty similar. This just has a meatier, beefier look. And if you look at something like this, I think the Ford Bronco is more like the original Land Rover Defender than the new Defender is. And so I love that. I love the fact that they were able to embrace that. They were able to bring heritage styling cues forward to the people that would recognize and appreciate that. I had no nostalgia, I should say, for the original Bronco. I had no love for the older Broncos going into this, but I really like this, and this as a standalone vehicle, I think looks good. Even though this is a far departure from all of the styling elements that we have now. The old round lights, those were because you could screw light bulbs into the sockets, and so I get why cars had round headlights. That's not something you see very much. They're very stylized. This whole front flat panel here doesn't make a lot of sense in the age of hypermiling, right? But it looks great, and it's got a little bit of that slanted front edge, which was kind of like the old the O.J. Simpson Bronco and some of the Ford vans at the time. And I love what they did about keeping this line straight, and even the roll cage here, and it might not be super easy to see, I wonder if there's a picture, but I think they did a great job of making the roll cage sympathetic to the rest of the vehicle. And yep, I guess here's a picture. So I think that what they did here was, especially on the Jeep Wrangler I had, it was kind of in there. It wasn't great. The version that I had, some of the earlier ones up through 91 had a slanted roll bar here. The one I had kind of the full roll bar. But what they've done here is they've really made it a stylistic element, and they've placed it inside the frame or the body here pretty significantly, so it actually makes these fenders look more pronounced. And what you can see here is this slanted edge. I don't think it's 45 degrees, but it really kind of comes out and gives some more haunch to those rear quarters, and it really gives it some muscle down here, and it actually makes it look like the vehicle is this size, the size of the roll cage, and then all of the body panels are even more hulking mass on the outside. So it does a really good job. I love these little elements here. I don't know if these are useful at all, if they're hard points, if you tie anything to them. They don't look big enough to really hitch anything to, but I really think Ford knocked it out of the park on the Bronco, and the interior looks great. It's very upright. It probably looks very similar to the original Bronco, but I think it fits the interior as opposed to just lifting something else from one of your other vehicles. I think this is on the Ford Ranger Raptor platform for the most part. Obviously, with the bigger wheels, you get a bigger off-road look. You get a meatier look. I think it looks amazing. I would love it, and it's starting at $30,000. I think that's a great deal. Now, as I understand it, if you go up to the Sasquatch level and some of those, you want the big wheels, which I certainly think look cool, and I don't know that you get the tow hooks on everything and some of the other features, but man, I think especially in this orange, I really, really dig it. They really did their homework. I mean, basically, if you kind of take the lessons from the Jeep Wrangler and apply them to your car, it's a great place to start. They did some smart things by making some storage available for the doors and putting the mirrors on the fenders themselves. So I think they did a great job of improving it, but I love it. I think it's the bee's knees, and I think they actually smashed it more so than the Jeep Wrangler and even Land Rover Defender, which I think I really liked. I really liked too. But man, if I had the scratch, I'd pick one up. It could be a great car to off-road, take to the ends of the earth, but also get around in the winter. Man, it's just got style, and I really like it. Even as a Jeep guy, I think the key is, we all like our brands. We're all a little bit brand loyal in some ways, but, guys like style. Guys like individuality. This car is brand new. Yes, when they get a million of them on the road, it may not be as unique as it is, but I just love that, some of the things that I would have loved Jeep to embrace, a little more integrated fender, bigger, more muscular look. The car I'm thinking of here is the Hummer HX. I thought that was a great design exercise for GM. I wish they had been able to hold on to the Hummer brand. It's coming back, and I'm sure that they might have something that's a competitor. The other thing is here that the wheels are pushed so far forward. You can see there's almost no overhang. Now, that's not necessarily unique. Jeep also has very little overhang, but on this Bronco, the wheels are pushed so far forward, it really gives you the look of that it's crawling, that it's kind of reaching out. And, I'm sure the approach and departure angles, as far as I can see, that they're very similar to the Jeeps. But, man, having those big wheels, having them very exposed here, very visible, it just, I love it. I love it. So, hey, if anyone has the new Ford Bronco and would let me beat it around for a few hours, I'd love to do a review on it. So, very cool. Hey, that's it. I just wanted to go out here and rant a little bit that I love the Bronco. I love it. That's it. Peter Von Panda, out.
This is the Peter Von Panda Podcast. A giant waste of time.